Yes, one of Ehrman's most common arguments that he makes all the time is an argument based on sheer numbers. Ehrman likes to quote numbers of variance within the New Testament textual tradition: 200,000, 300,000, even 400,000 of these particular numbers. Numbers mean a lot to Ehrman. In fact, on that basis alone, he makes all sorts of declarations and conclusions about whether the New Testament can be trusted and can be relied upon. Even says that there's more differences in our manuscripts than words in the New Testament. That's a very intimidating thing to learn when you hear it from a professor, but the problem is Ehrman leaves a lot of things out of the equation, which he doesn't actually include in his book in the way they ought to be declared, nor does he tell his students, that make those numbers look very different than they do at first glance. Let me just mention what a few of those things are. The first thing that Ehrman never bothers to talk about, at least at length in his book, is not just the quantity of numbers, but the kind of changes that we're talking about here. So it's not just quantity, but quality that's in view. What kind of changes are we talking about? Well, this is something that most people don't realize, but in ancient documents, not just the New Testament, but every document of history, there are certain types of scribal changes that happen just naturally. Slips of the pen, certain kinds of misspellings, certain kinds of word order changes and omissions, minor scribal variations that don't affect the integrity of the New Testament at all. In fact, most of these types of changes make up upwards of 80 to 90% of the type of scribal variations that we talk about in the New Testament. So when we're talking about meaningful scribal variations, we're talking about very few. If you add up all the different scribal changes that are out there, all the meaningless ones, of course you're going to get high numbers, but we're talking about the meaningful ones, the ones that make any impact. There's very few of those. But then there's a second thing that Ehrman doesn't bother to mention, and that is even of those small numbers of variants within the textual tradition that would be meaningful, we can determine which of those readings were original and which were not. In other words, these changes or supposed changes that Ehrman wants to say threaten the integrity of the New Testament actually don't threaten it, precisely because we can spot them when they happen. We can see when a scribe has made a mistake. We can see when a change has been made. And since we can spot those things within the manuscript tradition, they don't threaten the overall integrity of the New Testament text. And there's a reason we can spot them. The reason we can spot these changes when they take place is because we have so many manuscripts at our disposal that we can compare with one another. We can see where the changes take place. We can see where changes enter a tradition and exit the tradition. And we can see these changes happen over time and can trace our way back to the original. So that really is a third thing that Ehrman doesn't discuss. And this perhaps is the most remarkable thing, and that is the reason we have so many textual variations is for this simple fact that we have so many more manuscripts than any other document of ancient history. Now, the number of manuscripts is usually a positive thing in historical investigations. Usually if you have a lot of manuscripts, that's a good reason to think you can have a reliable text. But Ehrman takes what's usually something that's positive historical evidence and turns it around to make it negative historical evidence. Because since we have so many thousands of manuscripts, we have that many more opportunities to discover variants within the textual tradition, and the numbers go up. One question I often wonder is, what would Ehrman say if we only had, say, 5 copies of the New Testament and very few manuscript variations? Would he then consider the New Testament to be historically reliable because it had so few variants? One suspects the answer to that would be no. No doubt the complaint then would be that we don't have enough manuscripts. So whichever way you go, whether it's lots of variants or lots of manuscripts, either way, Ehrman has set the stage so that the position of seeing the New Testament as historically reliable just simply won't work.